Cars. A multi-billion-dollar cash cow, the love-hate property of the Pixar fandom, and a toy franchise that once got recalled for being poisonous. True story, that is. And if the rumors are true, we may very well be getting a fourth Cars movie sometime along the way before this decade is done. Many now understandably have a lot of nostalgia for the original, despite otherwise not looked on critically as Pixar's best. And to be fair, I get it. I hold the live-action Scooby-Doo movies at masterpiece status in my head, even though clearly it's not. Nostalgia does weird things. And I guess following in that logic, it is kind of appropriate that Pixar just literally characterized nostalgia as a character themselves in Inside Out 2, seeing as they're actually quite responsible for a good chunk of that emotion's real estate. Although most would also agree that Cars 2 is Pixar's worst movie, and then we're once again divided on Cars 3 being the best of the franchise. It's a weird thing. The critical acclaim or consensus for the Cars movie franchise. Because what we're actually really here to talk about is actually the financial success of this franchise. And despite the fact that we are going to get into how these movies have made a butt-ton of money, the movies really aren't actually a big part of that. And there is, of course, a far greater underground industry that is burrowing up to the surface every time there's financial profits to be made. Because you see, the original 2006 movie grossed $491.6 million. Not a bad claim to fame, especially considering this is a 2006 animated movie. It's not the billions they have nowadays, but hey, pretty damn good. A great foundation to clearly spin off more franchise content. Following up on that, you then have the $559.8 million success of everyone's favorite Cars 2, somehow the highest earner of the franchise, which really goes to maybe explain a lot of Disney and Pixar choices if one of their worst movies is their most financially profitable. And to be fair, that follows true with The Incredibles 2 as well, so ain't I glad that Inside Out 2 now has broken that record. And then finally, with notably diminishing returns, we have $383.9 million for Cars 3. Most likely because everyone saw Cars 2 and hated it. Didn't realize franchises could be so self-destructible, but there you are. The numbers themselves tell the story. Now, combining those three movies together, you get a nice conglomerate successful paycheck for a lovely CEO that makes for a worldwide total of $1.4 billion. It is a big successful number, one that many franchises would only dream of getting to. However, movie-wise for Pixar, it's definitely not top tier for them. I mean, Inside Out 2, I'm pretty sure has already exceeded that number by itself. It didn't take 3 movies to get there. Perhaps that's emblematic of where we are as an industry now, years and years later. This isn't your 2006 experience anymore. But of course, there are all sorts of other examples of fellow Pixar franchises making all sorts of billions. Toy Story 4 made over $1 billion alone, adding to a franchise total of $3.3 billion for the Toy Story saga. And yet, it's Cars that's getting all the more spin-offs and franchises, practical rip-offs, ideas, and cancelled movie projects being done by Disney on the side, as well as the rumors now that there's still a running engine for making Cars content. Where's the money in the Cars movie? Why even bother making another one when you've got such bigger gold mines to work with? Well, whilst the movies have made $1.4 billion, the actual financial throne that the Cars franchise sits on has secretly crept over to more than $10 billion. And the secret sauce that makes Cars the most financially profitable franchise for all of Pixar and Disney lies behind toys. You heard me right. Figurines, plastic, RC cars, visual eye candy, stickers, pins, backpacks, the full Disneyland experience. Roller coasters as well, I'm sure, exist. That's why these movies are worth making in the eyes of Disney. Cars has secretly been sitting on a gigantic gold mine of profits that the average person maybe hasn't really noticed in the gigantic Disney and Pixar zeitgeist. And we're not the ones that see that money transferring over. The point is, you can get to a point where you can just forget evaluating these movies and their success in normal terms. In business terms, the point of the Cars movies is not to be Cars movies. They are feature-length commercials that have, in themselves, also managed to make money. The toys aren't marketing for the movie is marketing the toys. Because whilst the movies don't do crazy numbers necessarily, these toys wouldn't be selling half as well as they would be if they were selling them without the movies. What is this weird red guy? Why is his eyes on the windshield? Where is his brain? And what does he do other than vroom vroom? To be fair, that is most of the toys anyway, but at least there's now visual eye candy to connect it to a bigger, notable movie from the pop culture perspective. In a weird way, each new movie release gives the brand a kind of legitimacy that helps sell the toys. It's a bit like what they've been finding with movies on streaming. Recent data has shown that even if they didn't make a lot in cinemas, movies that got a theatrical release actually get higher ratings on streaming services than the movies that just got a streaming-only release. In a similar way, the Cars movies may not be making a killing in cinemas, but the toys make the money because the movies were in cinemas. It's a weird thing, but that is absolutely what's going on. It's all part of the machine. The $10 billion machine. For some perspective, Star Wars of all things is often considered one of the most successful toy franchises of all time. Currently, before its Disney era, the all-time gross for Star Wars merchandise is $12 billion. Now, post-Disney, that has ballooned even further to over $32 billion in Star Wars merch, which is insane and just shows the level of Disney's terrifying powers. These are numbers that are not even close to the best movie gross of all time. However, somehow, $10 billion is still a lot from only 3 movies and some shorts. So you can see why Pixar's parent company may be pushing them to stay in the game and potentially make a 4th movie or some kind of side project. At the very least, that's why we're still getting occasional projects like Cars on the Road. However, Disney is not the only benefactor from the Lightning McQueen $. Lest we forget the lucky license holder of Cars toy production, Mattel. Ah yes, good old, we've had one hit movie, so let's commission 44 projects, Mattel. If these guys had a say, I'm sure we'd be on the 44th Cars movie by now. Somehow, it's probably the only company that is even more greedy and expandatory than Disney, I could argue. And boy, do they have all sorts of movie and TV series projects that they've handled and fumbled as well. I'm surprised we haven't mentioned this studio sooner. They grabbed the license from the off in 2006 and just never looked back. However, in fairness, they were definitely a sensible choice for the license. When you've made a movie about cars, you can kinda get behind the guy who handles Hot Wheels to make the toys, you know? They clearly know what they're doing, and also kinda prevents you from having to compete with them as well. Why wouldn't you want to compete with Mattel and Hot Wheels, you may ask? Well, just ask the slightly less known corporation Matchbox, Hot Wheels' longtime competitor. Admittedly, they are still in business, but there's one key detail to that. They are also owned by Mattel. Forget Disney and them monopolizing super corporate ways. Mattel is equally on the same route that Disney's been carving out since the 40s. Which does maybe raise some questions of ethics in the way of monopolies, considering they literally produce the 3 leading brands in toy cars. Although, to be honest, I don't think that's a lawsuit we're ever gonna get, so for now, we'll just accept that Disney made a good decision here. Go with a company who makes a million different car designs at a relatively low cost. Because on that front, Cars definitely got the full Hot Wheels treatment. You want a toy Mater? Well, they've got Dynaco Mater, Flying Mater, Tokyo Mater, Monster Truck Mater, Regular Mater, another Blue Mater, and so on and so on. I could literally do this for 2 hours when you talk about every single Cars merch there is. And that is just towards one singular character in one singular form. I'm not kidding when I say you can probably find a toy of every single Cars character ever seen on screen. The truck briefly seen waving the flag at the race? A figure. One of the mobile homes seen in the center of the crowd? A figure. The London bus, whose existence is completely redundant? A figure. The lost couple with the guy who refuses to use a map despite the fact that I have no idea how a GPS works inside of his car biology? A figure, of course. Seriously, does he see the GPS in his brain? Is there a little screen that pops out that we didn't see? Was the GPS, from his perspective, a form of non-essential surgery? No, I must resist the Cars universe makes no sense talk. It's a kid's movie, Daz. Doesn't need to make sense. But then why do they make a point that gas is their version of food, only for Mater to not shut his dumb mouth up about ice cream at the start of the second? Who knocked on Lightning's trailer in the first movie's opening scene? They have no hands! And how has most of this universe happened without the use of hands? Is it all done by the forklifts? The occasional use of their front tire for hand-type activity does not explain that. Okay, it's fine. Toys. Focus on the toys today. The toys make money, so whatever. The ones I really wanted were the Cars versions of the other Pixar characters from that one post-credits scene. I know I've mentioned it a handful of times now, but I just bloody love that scene. Those looked great. Give me a Mike Wazowski version of a smart car any day. Or better still, every John Ratzenberg character as a car who can then be stored all inside of a Mac. Where's that toy, Mattel? Hire me. Hello there, thank you for making it halfway through this video. We're doing something slightly off-brand today, talking about Cars stuff but adjacent to the movies. If you've got suggestions for other sort of off-topic things we can mention, do let me know. I have heard that there's lots of Shrek merchandise as well, but this doesn't need to be a merchandise series. Unless I do make a tax write-off and buy way too many of one franchise's merch. It's an idea. Anyway, thank you for making it halfway through. This is a cheeky plug today to subscribe if you haven't already and you want to see more. And I'll let you get back to the rest of our ramblings about the hidden Cars goldmine you didn't know about. Though Mattel had the foresight to get that license early doors in 2006, what they had less foresight for was how much of it to produce. You don't make the same mistake twice, unless you are a major toy company producing products for Pixar movies. Because in what is often compared to the shortage of Toy Story merch back in 1995, stores were struggling to keep their shelves stocked with Cars toys when the movie initially came out. Remarkably, this wasn't the only controversy with Mattel's Cars range within its first year of production, as a singular toy came into the firing line in the form of the Sarge character. And no, not because of anything military related. Famously, that is absolutely not a problem for the American toy industry. Plus, Plane seems to make it canon that Pearl Harbor and World War II happened in the Cars universe, so I guess war is just built into the franchise. Kinda makes sense. No, the issue was actually that their die-cast version of the Sarge character was poisonous. Every unit of this version of the Sarge character was recalled after it was discovered that impermissible levels of lead were used in the product. How does that happen? For a toy company as experienced as Mattel as well, that is pretty astonishing that something they produced in the 21st century had that problem. I mean, really, they were lucky to keep the license after that. Even then, the sales were so monumental from the get-go, I don't think there was any real risk of them losing it. Even 2 weeks out from the original film's release, estimates at the time indicated that the merchandise had already made $600 million. In 2 weeks, the merch had already surpassed how much the movie made overall. Again, from where Mattel's standing, it's just a 90-minute commercial. Every Cars character is basically another skin to overlay on a toy. I looked into the Pixar wiki, a reliable source, I know, and I could find examples of every nameless character Lightning McQueen raced in the original movie reproduced as its own figure. As if to say, hey kids, why don't you legitimately just recreate the entire stadium at this point with the amount of toys we've got on offer. For some of them, I could even find figures for some of their pit stop team. Yeah, remember the iconic forklift guy sponsored by N20 Cola? I guess that means colas now some cars have as well. Alright. The Zeppelin with Lightyear written on it floating over the race, they had a figure. And you can bet the variants of the main cast continued as well, with very little justification. They legitimately brought out a Blu-ray version of Lightning McQueen to commemorate the Blu-ray release of the movie. You could also get Tumbleweed Lightning McQueen, because there was a brief moment where Lightning had a tumbleweed on his head. Or Lightning McQueen with a shovel, for when he has to shovel the road that he wrecked. Rather hilariously, the variants also included a wrecked version of the King. Like, talk about beating a guy while he's down. You could also get the super rusty car Fred with bumpers both attached and detached. This was at least until 2011, when they completely wiped the Cars line off the shelves and completely replaced them with the Cars 2 line. And when it was time for Cars 3, you'll never guess what they did. Every short, every Disney Plus series, every strange non-Pixar spin-off is an absolute battery farm for a new line of toys. And of course, it should also be acknowledged that the merchandise is not just a bunch of die-cast cars. You've got an armada of remote control characters, ride me characters, cuddly cars. That one doesn't look right, does it? A plush version of Lightning McQueen. And if you like that, you'll also love multiple versions of the Lightning McQueen bed with matching bedding. That's right, you can go to bed in Lightning McQueen whilst cuddling Lightning McQueen and wrapped in Lightning McQueen after taking a sip from your Lightning McQueen bottle. Wow. See, if I had the finances behind it, maybe I'd consider buying one of every Lightning McQueen merchandise just to make a video out of that. Would that be in demand? Is that worth it for my poor bank account? I don't think so. Now, obviously, it's nothing new to have the full circuit of merchandise covered for a major franchise. I mean, it's definitely not reinventing the wheel, is it? Hey! Although, who did invent the wheel in the Cars universe? Were they not just always there? Of course, for the crown jewel of Cars' outer movie commerce, we then have to, of course, go to Disneyland. Because yes, when talking about Cars merchandise, it's just a sin to not also talk about Cars Land itself, in all of its gift shop stuffed glory. To be fair, if I did go there, that would be quite the tax write-off, so maybe I'll consider it. Now, if only I can find a way to stretch that into working for Nintendo World. That's the one I'm really into. Anyway, of all the franchises Disney has, they made an entire section of their park dedicated to cars. And to be fair, it is one of their better efforts. I mean, they literally rebuilt Radiator Springs, right down to the rock formations. They've literally just built the town. They have giant traffic cones everywhere. I'm pretty sure you can buy the food in the shape of a cone. Apparently, cones are on the menu in the Cars universe now. Every C-tier character, like Luigi, got their own ride. And to be fair, Luigi was my favorite as a kid. And the main attraction, of course, is Radiator Springs Races. Weirdly enough, this had already been commissioned before the Disneyland team knew what a Lightning McQueen even was, and would have looked at you weirdly if you mentioned Mater. Indeed, this was a ride that they were going to be doing anyway. A ride that makes you actually feel like you're in a car going at top speed. Which is a tall order when the car is still ultimately on a track and you're not actually allowed to go very fast, because apparently that's dangerous. It was originally intended to be an updated riff to a similar ride at Epcot called Test Track. Then, all of a sudden, Pixar rocked up and said, hey, you can slap some faces on these cars now. Are the headlights the eyes? No, don't be ridiculous. We're gonna put the two pupils on the windscreens. Much more normal. So what are the headlights for? Well, let me tell you. Anyway, that all lined up quite nicely, and honestly, I don't know if they would have gone this hard on a Cars Land if they hadn't already started on this overlapping project. It's a popular IP that warrants a ride, but not many Disney properties got this level of treatment up to this point. This was before the days of, we're gonna create half a Star Wars planet followed by an ill-conceived Star Wars hotel that lost us a lot of money. This was a big project to embark on back in the day for one relatively recent movie, as was the case at that time. And in fact, ahead of Cars Land's 2012 launch, I wouldn't be surprised if Disney was like, alright Pixar, we're gonna go all in on the Cars theme park, so you better make a second movie. It's all I can think of when it comes to explaining the finished project, because they literally got no time to write it properly. To be fair, they literally put Cars 2 references around the park during the launch, so, I guess it makes sense. That's the attachment evidence for my very loose theory there. And the land came into play at a very interesting time for Disneyland, because infamously, they'd attempted to expand Disneyland in the 90s with a secondary park next door. Called Disneyland's California Adventure, it soon went down in history as a complete conceptual disaster. In trying to recreate California iconography on a lower budget, they're basically just done a regular California fairground with some decent rides on the side. And in a ride about paparazzi chasing down a limo that launched around the time of Princess Diana's death, and oof. Essentially, they needed to revamp this park big time. And when Bob Iger took over the Disney throne, he began doing just that with, let's throw every IP we own that we haven't used yet at this park. To be fair, part of this strategy was full-on buying Pixar after the two companies were having quite a public falling out, which kind of saved Disney on the animation front when their in-house studio was floundering to catch up with the industry. And of course, the big part of the merger was access to turning all the Pixar IPs into Disneyland rides, specifically rebooting Disney California Adventure. Soon after the merger, this specific park received a Toy Story section called Midway Mania, and of course Cars Land 2. And ultimately, they did do an incredible job with that one. Probably fair to say, it far surpasses the quality of any of the movies. I know, fighting words when we've got critical darling, planes, fire, and rescue out there. It has a ridiculous amount of detail. They built the rock formations from the movie, like that's crazy. And Radiator Springs Racers has ever since been a staple attraction of the park, which is great for the gift shops peppered around throughout. As you can imagine, absolutely stacked when it comes to the merch options, more Cars merch revenue, and probably at twice the price. From here, it wasn't just figurines and beds, it was absolutely everything that the Disneyland experience gives you. You've got the standard tiny toys, but then of course you've got the cosmetics, the little wand props you can probably play around with. In the land, as we mentioned, you've got all sorts of themed food items, which I guess technically counts as Cars merch. The classic Disney backpacks that for some reason kids like to wear, but there's no storage in them, so they're pretty inefficient if you ask me. And just a million different options of Disney doing their Disney thing now that they've got the full reins and a full district area to dedicate to it. I guess it's appropriate that a franchise based around something as commercial as Cars is also Pixar's most commercially successful brand. Add on to the fact that the further it expands and the way it's able to collaborate with real Cars industry celebrities to just make more IP'd characters and then more merch out of them, like a Lewis Hamilton car or the Pope. And it really is just an endless pit of money bags that just keeps printing out more money. Again, it's mad to think how much money this property has made off of merch and external media when its box office comparatively barely is a fraction of all that. Just recently, we've seen the Despicable Me franchise surpass $5 billion with $6 billion in merch sales to get around to the 11 to 12 billion total. And the Cars movies have made less than half of that 5 billion figure at 1.4 billion. That's barely a quarter of what Despicable Me has done. And yet, add in the merch sales and Cars is neck and neck with them. With those kind of numbers, I think we can bet that they are not done with this nonsensical universe of living vehicles quite yet, and before this decade's up, we will probably get a fourth installment in some shape or form. Whatever shape or form that is, it'll probably come in all sorts of plastic as well. The ability to turn Cars characters into merchable items is on par with the likes of Funko Pops in the modern age, I would say. And truly, it is the hidden gold mine buried beneath the Cars franchise wheels. So if you've ever considered buying any sort of Cars toys, I'd love to hear which one is actually your favorite. I never fell into the hole that badly, but maybe I will soon. Do you think it's a good idea to buy some Cars merch and, I don't know, review it, put it all together? I see a weird future of mine coming up soon. We'll see. Heck, I bet if I dig around long enough, I'll find something like a Lightning McQueen TV or a Meta condom. I guess we'll find out soon. But for now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do tell me your thoughts about Cars merch if you've been at all aware of it up to this point. And I shall see you in a little bit.